Hi, welcome back to Frazzle Dad's Minis. I'm Jim, Frazzle Dad, and today I'm going to show you how I made these awesome, creepy-looking cultists. These are from the Gloom and Doom domain, which is one of the many things that Dungeons and Dreadnoughts oversees. And I got these in a gift package from Shane and was really intrigued by them. As with everything from Dungeons and Dreadnoughts and his crew, the models are just glorious. There's a lot of great detail. There's really lovely tiny little runes on some of the chest cloths, the textures. Everything about them was really cool. And they've got these big, beautiful flowing robes. And I just love me painting some robes. Had a few ideas about color schemes, looked at some paints, marked a few things up in Photoshop. I'm not really showing any of that. Enough jabbering. Let's just get after it. I'm starting to take a look at colors that I want for the robes. I love the combination of green and violet, and so I was looking at something kind of darker and deep, so I settled on Broken Anvil, green number 1 and violet number 1. Both the numbers 0, 1, and 2 in the green and violet ranges go on pretty well. The green has some weird sheen issues. It's much glossier than the other paint ranges, but these were going to get covered with a matte varnish later anyway, so I wasn't overly worried about that. So it's just going and blocking out those two really glorious colors on all of these 3 different cultists. A pal turned me on to P3's Sanguine. Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyway, it is this really rich, dark red that I forget about because it's my P3 paints are off to the side and I'm not looking at them all the time. But it's this glorious deep red, and I thought that would play off really well on the shoulder pads of the cultists. Later on, I'll use P3's Sanguine Highlight, which is a lovely lighter shade of this, but here I'm just blocking this in on the shoulder pads. I'm using Broken Anvil Blue number 3, which is a lovely mid-range blue, and I'm just getting the chest pieces in of the cultists. Later on, I'll actually come in and darken up the lower parts of these to try to better convey some of the environmental lighting and shadow, but I'm really not messing with light anywhere on these. I'm just trying to see if I like the colors that I'm blocking in. Here I'm throwing down some Proacryl bright red on the tentacles, whatever, coming out of the cultist's face. This is, I knew when I put this down this was too bright, but I'm just trying again to see if rough colors work. I'll come in later and really darken this down a bunch aside from highlights. But this gave me a sense that red was right, just not this red. Now I'm working on the tentacles, and I don't have a color up here because this was kind of a mishmash of several things I had on the wet palette. Sorry for the piece being off frame a bit. I was trying to avoid using the same exact color on the robes and on the tentacles and then on these big tentacles out of the base, so I mixed some things together. So this is a mix of that P3 Sanguine, of the Violet from Broken Anvil. I may have thrown in a bit of that Pro Acryl red to brighten it up a bit, but I'm just trying to get a bit of color differentiation between the various things that I have on the piece. Also, I'm actually varying this a bit as I move between the three different pieces, so that my goal, and I don't know if it actually ended up rendering out in the finals, but I was hoping to have a little bit of variation between each of the three pieces. But I really like how these basic colors are going together at the moment. Now I'm coming back in and hitting some of the edges on those shoulder pieces with that P3 Sanguine highlight. Those two go together really well. I love P3 paints. I've only got, I don't know, maybe 10 of them. And I need to use them more because, they just make me happy. They've got great pigments. They don't have some of the drama that I run into with Broken Anvil. I'm actually, this is a tangent, but it's germane. I've actually backed the P3 Paint Kickstarter, and I'm really looking forward to getting a big-ass box of them sometime next year. Anyway, this is just working on all those details there. Now I'm starting to work on blocking out the leather books. I'm using just one of the generic browns from Broken Anvil, and a bit later I'll mix in, I can't even remember what yellow I had. I think it was one of like the Viejo ochres, might have even been an AK olive green, don't know. But just to give sort of a paper look to the pages, the edges of the books. These little details on these models are just awesome. It's the right amount of detail without it being overly fussy. There's leather straps on the books. There's a bit of some decoration on the cover of the books that's just high enough to easily paint with a very differentiated color. Hopefully that made sense. Anyway, this is just working on each of these pieces and playing with, the glorious level of detail here. Here I'm starting to add some shadows into the folds of the cloaks, and then also darkening up the lower parts. And I'm doing that by taking Violet number 1, whatever the base that I was using, and I'm adding in the additive or neutral black, and then just doing some wet blending. You can see I'm kind of slopping stuff on here and then trying to get some practice reps in on wet blending. So I'm focused mostly on the shadows and then trying to pull up and make smooth blends here. Just getting the reps in and doing the work. Here I'm just throwing on a white mark on each of the pieces because I'm trying to hit each of the three pieces with a different lighting effect. And so I just put a white mark on different parts of the figure, on the different figures, so that I could remember where my light source was. On the first one, it was from the upper left of the figure. On the second one, it was from the upper right. And that final one was from center. My idea is that they would be in, sort of a circle. I don't know that I pulled it off, but it was a neat idea. Here I'm coming in with Violet number 4 from Broken Anvil. As I've mentioned before, several of the different paint ranges, the number 3 and especially the number 4 paints, pick up a whole lot of moisture on the wet palette, so they kind of fall apart. I'm gradually learning to work with that, but here I'm just using the lighting scheme for each of the pieces that I'm working with and trying to use that pretty paint to illuminate following the lighting pattern. In this case, this piece, things were hitting from the front, so I'm trying to illuminate things and highlight things somewhat evenly. Just getting the reps in. Here I'm darkening down that blue front cloth piece, and I've added in a bit of black to the blue that I'd used, and it's a little bit thicker. I don't know, maybe it's a thick glaze, but I'm hitting the bottom parts of all of those to try to give just the impression of a little depth there. Jumping ahead to a little bit more work on the tentacles, you can see that I've darkened them down from that bright red, and now I'm taking a mix of red and black, and I'm trying to line in around the tentacles to really make the shadows much deeper. So it's just some careful brushwork. Then I'll come in with pretty much full-on pyro red, maybe even a little bit of orange to really make the tentacles pop. Now I'm starting to paint up the very delicate but very crisp, lovely little runes that are on these I don't know what you call them, the parts of their uniform that hang down over their front, vestments, I don't know. Anyway, again, trying to follow my lighting scheme, I actually used 3 different types of metallic paints. Pro Acryl, which is just wonderful. So I'm using my Rosemary & Co. Billy Shoal brush, which has an amazing tip, and it's perfect for this kind of detail work. So I'm trying to start at the top with a somewhat less bright, like a gold. I'm using some dark silver and then some silver as, the lighting would move or appear down those pieces of cloth and strike the runes differently. I don't know if it worked. I had a really good idea. It was fun to do. I sort of pulled it off. I don't know if it reads as intended, but it was really cool to piddle around with. Now I'm just picking out the edge highlighting on the leather book, on the robes, a couple other pieces. As you can see from my wet palette, I've got a whole bunch of different paints on there. At this point, I have no fucking clue what paint that is. It's just a light tan. I might have mixed it. It might have been something from a pot. Don't know. Now I'm picking out the details on the book covers. This time I do know the paint. It's just a lovely bright red from Pro Acryl. And again, the modelers, when they sculpted this part, this specific detail on the books, it's just easy to pick out. They did a great job sculpting it. It's very clear, it's very precise, so it's easy to make it pop with some lovely red. I left the skin until very late in my painting process because I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I had all of these other great colors, and then it finally struck me after I saw someone else painting sort of a vampiric mini, and I thought that pale blue, undead-like flesh would be a great approach for this. So here I'm just mixing bits of cold blue and cold black. It gives that nice gray blue color, and I'm trying to get pretty much black in the crevices and then bring that up with some mid-tones and then hit just a touch of that almost pure white for some highlights. And I was really happy with how this came out. You don't have to decide everything up front. I had a long career in software development, and there was a really interesting philosophy that some people took, which was actually borrowed from Toyota's lean manufacturing, and it's called the moment of last responsible decision making. Like, if you don't know how to decide on something, it's okay to punt that decision down the road until you know more about the problem you're trying to solve. And so I'm okay with putting things off until later in the mini because I'll have a better idea of what I want to do. And this is a great example of that. That was a long story, but it had a point. Getting very near the end. Here I have used, pretty much just a grab bag mix of tans that I pulled from some of the browns and blacks and I think a little bit of red that I had on the wet palette to just make sort of a bony tan color. I'll hit this with a Citadel wash later in the game, but right now I'm just going around and getting the main parts of the skulls. I'll mix in a little more white or a little more of that very light tan to do a little bit of highlighting, but I don't want to do too much. These are down at the base and I don't want to draw too much attention to them, but I want people to know they're there. Going back and I'm picking out each individual sucker on every tentacle with a bit of, I think I just grabbed the same kind of blue-gray that I used on the skin. I just want them to pop off a bit. It's a really cool detail on the sculpt, and I want to make sure I grab each of them just so, it's a great detail, and I want to make them pop. There you have it. These were a lot of fun to work on. Again, the textures, the detail, and they're just creepy. So it was a lot of fun to deal with. Hope you can get access to them. I think that however these land in a campaign or just part of their Patreon, they're really wonderful models. And enough of that. Here's the grand reveal. There you go. I hope you enjoyed that. These were a lot of fun to work with. If you haven't already, please help me grow a little bit. Hit the subscribe button. I'm a tiny channel, and I appreciate anybody who gives me a subscription and helps me grow some. Give me a thumbs up if you liked the content, and drop me a comment and let me know what you thought of these pieces. Until next time, remember, be kind, especially to yourselves. Learn something, experiment, FAFO. Remember, at the end of the day, it's just paint and plastic. Until next time, so long.